Welcome to Optimal Game State. Today I'm going to be going over a battle report that I had recently with one of my friends, Owen, for Legions Imperialis. Owen can be found on a podcast that's focused on RPGs and board games called The Adventuring Party, which I will link in the description. It is a Irish-based podcast that has been going on for ages, and if that's your thing, there's lots of stuff that you can go through and you can check out. In this instance, we were playing some Legions Imperialis. Now, I obviously was talking about this before the game came out, and Owen contacted me, said he was interested, and we basically said we would work towards getting as much painted up as we possibly could before a fixed date. And then we were going to try to get that game played in. Great way to motivate yourself, give yourself a deadline, and get focused on stuff. So this is everything that I had managed to get together. So we have all of the Legion contents from the core box. So that's your 3 Predators, your 2 Sicarians, bunch of infantry. I did get an extra box of infantry, so this is actually 2 boxes there. Then I also got a box of Kratos super heavy tanks. So there on the left. The Thunderhawk gunship, which is painted in Black Temporal colors, was already done because I do quite like Aeronautica. And I'm not going to repaint them because it works perfectly for First Legion from the Imperial Fist. So we're going to be sticking with this. In the background, I've got a couple of knights. I do have a collection of Titans, but at this level, I figured it would kind of make more sense to go for something a little bit smaller. So this is everything I had. I wasn't expecting to use everything. This isn't, due to the number of knights, that this couldn't be a legal army, but it gave us some options. Before we get stuck into it, I do want to talk about the painting side of things. I've mentioned Mediocre Hobbies before. He definitely has the best approach, in my opinion, to actually painting these, which is don't make a masterpiece. Get it undercoated, get contrast on it, pick out some details, and get it on the table. There are, as we saw from the previous picture, let me skip back quickly. So that's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9 stands of infantry. So 9 by 4 is 36, and then there's 5 on each of those, and then that's not including the dreads or anything else. It really starts to add up. There's a lot to work through. So, just kind of focus on getting the main details. And when it's on the table, it'll look great as long as you've, got the main colors down. Now, what I want to talk about here is if you look at this particular picture, you can see I've got transfers everywhere. So you've got like the number, you've got the Imperial Fist logo, and they're all from the transfers that you get in the box. I also have a couple of caution and warning signs and little just to the left of the heavy bolter spawn, so you can see there's a little bit of text there as well. These were little bits that I managed to find from one of the Mecha Gunpla transfer kits. I don't have the model myself, but I did in one of my stores find the transfers were relatively cheap. And they just had tons of these little caution and warning symbols, which I thought looked great. So at this scale, I have found that getting your main colors down, then getting a bunch of transfers on, use your microset, use your microsol, and then use some contrast over it. So what I like to do is I like to use a 50-50 contrast Basilicanum and contrast medium, and then wash the entire thing with it. That means you end up with this kind of rugged, grey, battered look. If that's not your style, and I can understand if it's not, you can just leave out the Basilicanum and then just go for some of the contrast. The reason you want to do that is when you use it over the transfers, it mats them down and it makes it look like they're just painted on. Just a really, really great way of finishing off your transfers. And at this scale, I think transfers are just a really, really good way to kind of draw the eye and make it look like there's a lot more detail when all you've really done is got the contrast and the kind of bare basics down. Anyway, I just want to mention that. Here is the list I brought. So we pulled it down to what essentially is 1250 points, I guess. So yeah, I think this will be legal as a 1250 point army, which was relatively good starting point. So we've got our Legion Demi Company, and I've got a HQ stand, which is required. I do have the 2 tactical attachments required. And one of those tactical attachments, I've added in an extra 2 guys into it. And actually, one of the things I was able to do, and I think we've talked about this before, you're going to make 1 commander out of each box, which does leave you with a couple of models left over. There are important characters on the sprue, like the banner, the commander, the apothecary that kind of are very distinctive. But the other two guys, the only thing special about them is they've got the fancy hats. So you can actually mix those in, and because of the way you do have a commander, a lieutenant in your 5-man squads, you do end up with a couple of guys spare. So I was actually able to make an extra 2. Not that it's relevant for this, but it is something to kind of keep in mind. Along with that, we do have for the optionals. So we've got a Dreadnought Talon. I was able to build 2 sets of them, because again, 2 boxes, which meant I was able to split out my assault cannons and my las cannons. And this one I just ran with the las cannons, a lot simpler. Then the missile launchers has a full squad. Again, you need to get 2 boxes before you can actually get out the full 4 stands, which is why I definitely recommend it. The Legion in particular do need 2 boxes. So 1 core box, 1 big core box, and 1 box of extra guys for Legions means you can actually field an independent detachment. As we'll see later, there's definitely an argument to get more and more and more and more, but that's just the way the game is. Similarly, we've got the Terminator attachment. These guys have teleports. We'll drop them in later. And we have a Thunderhawk gunship. We will be starting that in reserve. We will be dropping a big pile of men onto the board once we get that in place. The second one is an armored company. This is the bare minimum that you can legally field. So 3 Preds, 2 Sicarians, which are coming from the core box, and then I did pick up a box for the Kratos, which has 4, and in this case I'm using 2 of them for the heavy armor slot. I did bring 2 Questoris Knights. They're as part of my Knight Household Lance. Yeah, so I do have these together. I think for a lot of time, if you can separate them out, it probably makes a little bit more sense, makes it a little bit more flexible. My opponent, Owen, was playing Blood Angels. He didn't get as much painted as I did. Yeah, so we got the bare requirements. So we've got his Legion command squad. We've got 2 tactical attachments. He has added on 2 additional Assault Marines and 2 additional Legion Terminators. This was more a what we have rather than a tactical choice. And then we've got a Legion Dreadnought Talon and a Thunderhawk gunship. So in many ways similar to what I have. He does have a slightly illegal armored company here, so he doesn't have any heavy options yet. He just hadn't got around to building his Kratos yet, but he does have 6 Predators instead of normal 3, and then 4 Sicarians instead of normal 2. So it's a big chunky block of armored. For the Knights to kind of get the points up a little bit closer, again, we broke the rules a little bit here, and he's got 415, which is more than you normally have, and it's 2 Cerastus. And again, yeah, I do have them listed here as 1, but we'd ended up feeling them as 2 separate ones. Neither here nor there. We're just here to play the game and have a little bit of fun, so it doesn't really matter that we kind of fudged the rules slightly. This is the mission we picked out. We wanted to get something relatively simple, and this is a 1 objective at the back, 1 objective in your opponent's zone, and then 1 in the middle. You get more points for controlling the one in the middle. There are a few rules that I think we missed in that. I think you only got points from the center one if no one else was there. Whereas I think I did end up getting a few points when the knight was close enough to contest it, but wouldn't have had anywhere close near the number of infantry, or the infantry numbers that I had. Anyway, we're not going to really focus about that. There were points. We did calculate a winner, but I'm not going to go into too much detail on that. We did have secondary objectives, and again, we went for something relatively simple, which was just counting up points based on kills. So at the end of it, what percentage died and which percentage didn't. We got kind of values on it. Here is our board. So it is Deep Cut Studios. Yeah, that's it. Who have a couple of different board styles that look great. In this instance, we didn't use all of it, so we did use the full width, which I think is, the full depth, which is 4 foot, but I think we ended up with a relatively tight, it might have been like a 3 foot width. The terrain itself is part of Gale Force 9's Battletech terrain. So I didn't realize before turning up, they do come with hex bases, which looks a bit awkward if you're doing for Legions Imperialis, but once you take them off and drop them down, they actually look great. Now, we don't have a lot here, so it is a chunky amount of terrain physically, but once you actually get on the board, there's not a lot. So as you can see, there's a lot of straight firing lanes. And we did discuss this at the start about how much terrain is the right amount of terrain. I have a little bit of experience playing Infinity. Not a great amount of experience. Haven't played a tournament or anything like that. But I am aware from looking at the game and reading up on it that there's an interesting difference between the US and the UK scenes, insofar as the terrain on the EU boards. EU and US. So the terrain on the EU boards tend to be a lot more dense. Tends to be a lot more model or buildings down, whereas you kind of have more clear firing lanes over in the US meta. This means that a sniper or a heavy rocket launcher is going to be a lot better on a US board than it is necessarily going to be on a EU board. And the idea that there is one set of terrain that is correct or right or better, I think is a mistake. And the reason is, as soon as you change the terrain, then certain detachments in this case, or models or infantry, are going to be better or worse. That's a feature, not a flaw. If you stick with the same type of layout, whether that's a completely empty board or a completely packed board, you will drift towards certain expectations on how the game should and should not be played. But the reality is, if you were a commander fielding your Horus Heresy style army, you would have to adjust depending on whatever terrain you ended up in. So I think that's something to keep in mind. There is no right or wrong amount of terrain. If you play this game with no terrain on the board, you will have a certain experience. That experience is not necessarily better or worse, it's just different. Certain units are going to be a lot better than others. You know, your range ones with good line of fires and good range are going to be able to get those shots in a lot earlier. Your close combat troops probably aren't going to be able to as easily get into position and get their charges off. But the reverse is also true. So keep that in mind. In this case, I will say I don't think this is necessarily a perfect, even though I'm saying that there's no such thing. I don't think it's necessarily perfect. I think if we had more terrain, we probably would have put more terrain down, but we felt that it was enough to get a bit of an experience. The important thing is we do have buildings that we can stick our infantry in, which I think is kind of an important feature of the game. I think if you were playing a board without any buildings where you could actually stick your infantry, then that would, well, it wouldn't be wrong, but it would remove maybe a feature of the game that I think Games Workshop are kind of emphasizing. Anyway, and as you can see, we have reversed, for some reason, the objective points. So they were on the left, but we put it on the right. I mean, it makes no difference. We have deployed. So this is at the start. This is my deployment, my Imperial Fist. So at the left, we have my two Questoris Knights. Then we have my two Kratos tanks. My missile launchers are right there. As you can see, they're right in front of the building that they are quickly going to move into place with. We do have my dreads in the middle. I figured with their las cannons, that's probably a good line of fire positioning. Didn't quite work out, as we'll see. On the right-hand side, I do have my Predators and my Sicarans behind it. One of the questions that we did end up asking was about line of sight. And from reading through it, one of the things that kind of confused us slightly was there is a paragraph talking about how bases in a detachment, don't block each other, which suggested to us that in this case, the Predators would be blocking the Sicarians. On review, the example they gave was like a big tank blocking the way. And I think the idea is if you can get line of sight on it, if once you look down, you can get a shot, like in this case, the Sicarians would be able to, fire between those two Predators or just over the Predators because they're actually not that very big, and that it is a legal shot. Yeah, that was a bit confusing, but I felt we were happy enough with how we played it. Then last on the right-hand side, I've got a tactical attachment, which I'm just going to plop into that building, which is going to be close enough to hold that victory point. Off board, we do have my Thunderhawk. That does have my command and that tactical detachment with 6 bases in it. So that is 7 out of the 8 slots in the Thunderhawk gunship. On the other side, my opponent lined up like this. So we do have his command on the top left, then a tactical attachment, the 2 knights, that if you look at it, you will see that there is a plasma gunner in that tactical attachment. And we do have a couple of empty bases. That was just to round out because we didn't have enough models painted. But that's okay. We still had a good time. Again, we have the dreads basically lined up against the opposite dreads. And then we've got his 2 sets of tanks. So the Sicarians first, and then the Predators on the right-hand side. So it is 6 of them. They are slightly cut off because I didn't get the full range on this particular image. Notably, we were playing a relatively small battle, but the amount of troops were just jammers. So it did feel like a really big battle, a big game. Obviously, if we were going to be going for a larger amount, we might have expanded the width of the board. But yeah, I think you end up with a lot of stuff trying to compete for space when you put in your deployment. Not seeing here is he does have his Thunderhawk gunship. We did, as I'll talk about later, mess the rules up slightly or break the rules, depending on how you look at it. But I'll get to that once he deploys. All right, so here is our map. This is our start of the game. The map isn't exact. As you can see, I'm using squares and rectangles rather than the weird hexagon shapes. And yeah, some of the positions are, let's say, relative to what they actually are. But they're kind of a bit of guesswork. So it'll give us an idea of where we go. All right, start of turn 1. As you can see, this is the kind of view from my side. One of the big questions we felt at the start was who was going to be able to get the initial volley. So we do have the 2 armored companies facing off against each other. In the end, I do manage to get the roll, so I will be getting to fire first. As you can see here, you can kind of see in the distance, we do have a lot of clear lines of fire. So yeah, there's a lot of detachments that can see each other, even if maybe things are currently a little bit out of range. So those lance cannons can't reach all the way down. I don't think those battle cannons for the Kratos can either. One of the things of note is that we did favor sponsons with the heavy bolters. I think pretty much everything we fielded, apart from the Predators. All the Predators were the last cannon sponsons, but there was a lot of heavy bolter sponsons and heavy bolter fire, which I think was the right call. As we'll see throughout, we did find a lot of melee, a lot of infantry and infantry charges, and infantry were kind of one of the most important things that we had in this game. The last part we did during the movement phase was to drop in our Thunderhawk gunships, who are dropping in our tactical attachments. So on the left-hand side, I just went for the center. I dropped in my full set of 6 and my command squad all into the middle. They are going to get hammered, but I will say at this point that the feel no pain that the apothecary in the command squad gave was super, super good. Getting an extra roll. I think it was a 5+ roll because they're infantry. So that was key. That was very, very important. So I will be looking to keep my commands team next to my tacticals as much as I can, because I thought that was really, really great. Owen had a different approach. So rather than trying to get that center one, he decided to take my area's victory point. What he's after doing here is a little good, a little bad. So yeah, as I said, we were playing relatively flexible with the rules, working with what we had. So it's not necessarily bad of him to have separated out that Terminator and Assault. Because there were only 2 of each, they should have been sticking with the tacticals. Again, neither here nor there. The mistake he made, though, was he had forgotten or didn't realize that although they have bulky, the heavy assault transport, that is the Thunderhawk gunships, ignores that. So he only put in 4 bases into this Thunderhawk gunship because he thought the bulky was going to take up 2, when in reality he could have squeezed in a little bit more. What we have here is we've got the Assault Marines and we've got the Terminators deploying out of the Thunderhawk gunship and charging in against that tactical squad that's stashed in the building. It was one of the first things that kind of happened, and I completely forgot to react, do some Overwatch on them charging in. That battle will play out as it plays out. Okay, so this is kind of what it looked like. As you can see, I've moved my missile launchers forward a little bit, and they've stashed up in that building. Really good line of fire from here. They've got great range. They're able to kind of pick away at things. and they definitely do. And yeah, everything just kind of moved a little bit closer on this turn. The only real things, so his infantry did charge to get that building that's almost in the middle. I think his dreads did as well. So you don't get the fire, although mine do because they move a little bit less. And then you can see his knight has made a good chunk of the speed to get to where it is. And yeah, again, he just moved up his guys to get into place. So that is his command squad and a tactical squad, like 4 bases of it, all sitting in that central building. And then he's got a 4 bases of tactical at the back. Oh, we got a little bit of video, so you can kind of see what's going on. All relatively conservative at this point. We're just kind of slowly moving up. And a lot of it already is kind of decided based on how we deployed. And we probably have a little bit of a gap in coherency on the right, but that's fine. All right, that's our board. So this is what it looked like after the movement on turn 1. A lot of pushing forward and then deploying down. The ability to just drop a massive amount of troops in with Thunderhawk gunships was super big. We are going to be seeing drop ships or drop pods soon. We are also going to be seeing an easier to get Arvis flyer collection. And because they can just kind of come in and drop the troops down straight away, it's very hard to interfere with that. So yeah, I did think that was super good. But obviously you are paying a lot for it. So from here on out, those Thunderhawk gunships are going to have to roam around and try and make up their chunky number of points. I definitely liked with how they worked, and I'll be looking at more flyers down the line. This is the actual map, so you can see how things were. And then these are where some of the damage happened. So starting at the bottom right, that particular close combat ended up 2-2, so it was a draw. My Predators did open up on his Predators first. They actually took down 2 out of his 6 Predators, which was good, and lost 1 in return. My infantry in the middle got hammered. So we did start with 6 and a command, so 7 in total. By the end of turn 1, we were just down to the 3, so that was pretty rough. The missile launchers at the back did fire into the dreads and took out half of them, which was good. I think there's a couple of wounds go down as well, so I do think one of my Kratos gets hit from the Thunderhawk gunship and does take a wound. And I think one of the knights, you can see there's a red marker beside the knight he has there. I think my Thunderhawk gunship opened up on his knight. So that's what we had on that side. Oh, another video. I think this is probably the last video I took, unfortunately. But yeah, you can see it was a bit of a hammering. That was a lot. But that central objective was giving me significant points. So at the end of this, I did get a big chunk of victory points for holding that central objective. All right, start of turn 2. The first thing we looked at was on the left-hand side. So you can see we've got the knight Cerastus and we've got the 2 knight Questoris on my side. As my opponent is lining this up, I was fully expecting a knight-on-knight battle, which I was thinking was going to be a lot of fun. He had a different opinion. His Cerastus knight charged into my Thunderhawk gunship, which caught me a little bit off guard. My 2 Cerastus knights were then able to charge in behind him, but the Thunderhawk gunship doesn't really have a lot of defenses in close combat. It's a bit of a weird one. Now, normally flyers wouldn't anyway, because you couldn't catch them, but at this point it has landed, so it's currently counting as a skimmer. At the end of this turn, it will change back to a flyer, at which point I don't think the knight can hold it. At least we didn't play it as if it did. It got caught in that kind of weakened state for a little bit. I dropped in my Terminators at the back. They had to stand there and shoot first. And we did actually do it slightly out of order. I did forget that I was supposed to be doing it until a little bit later down the turn. And Owen quite generously let me go back and do it. As you can see, his tanks on the right-hand side are slowly moving down. And his knight dangerously moves in beside my tanks. And again, this one kind of caught me a little bit off guard. It is actually pretty terrifying. So what happened down here? Yeah, looking at that knight first, the knight took out 2 of my tanks. Because it's got like that plus 14, it's got Ren, so it's rolling 3 dice. That is a hefty chunk. And yeah, and then it's got an extra bonus for charging. And it after it kills something, it can, because it's got the lance, it can actually extend its melee range to drag something else into the fight if it wanted. So yeah, in this case, it was, even though extra dice were being rolled, it was able to kind of carve its way through. So that particular knight performed well above its weight, was pretty terrifying. The tanks just above it focused their fire in on the remaining troops, and I'll actually show how we did that in a second, because there was a lot of heroics happening. And then my Terminators, I think, got finished off. I think they at that point tried charging in. I think in a close combat they lose it. Okay. Oh yeah, no. So there was shooting. Okay, and then yeah, there was a bit of back and forth with the knights. There's at least one other wound in there. You can't quite see it, but they managed to get 2 wounds onto the Cerastus, and they're slowly pushing it down. I think this is the end of the turn. So yeah, this was with the this was with the Sicarians. So what happened here is we had 2 of the infantry stands left. They actually charged in against the Sicarians. Sicarians used their point defense heavy bolters to fire at them and basically obliterated them. But that meant when the command squad charged in, the command squad was able to go in without any point defenses, wasn't get shot at, and in the ensuing melee, did actually take out one of the Sicarians. That meant it was no longer in combat. That meant that the Thunderhawk gunship could freely fire at it without any problems. So yeah, that was a little bit of fun happening there. So yeah, you can see there's a charging in. That is my dreads moving in, because obviously I've lost everything. I'm trying to push it up. The missile launchers at the bottom do open up on that infantry in the central square. And yeah, I'm trying to move my Krautas up in the hopes that I could take that back objective and see where that goes. But that doesn't particularly work out. So yeah, this is the knight finishing off the Predators now. My tactical squad in the bottom right do manage to kill the last of the Terminators and assault troops that had come in. And then there's a hail of fire going on. I will say I did find the missile launcher squad super, super good. And I'd even forgotten the fact that the Imperial Fists get to re-roll with the missile launchers. They've got great range. They can switch between optimal fire for targets. So they were able to target tanks with their crack missiles, and they were able to target infantry in buildings with their frag, which was super, super good. Yeah, they were fantastic. The only problem is to actually field a single detachment of 4 bases, you need to get 2 boxes of infantry, which is rough. All right, what else do we have going on? Okay, so this is turn 4. Yeah, so the knight has already cleared out all of the tanks on the right-hand side. And here you can see he has moved down into combat with the tactical squad in the building. On the left-hand side, on the top right, top left, we can see that Owen has taken his tactical squad that had controlled the objective. They do still control it. As long as no one comes in to take it, they'll still control it. And he's moving those to try get into a better firing position, or closer to the central target, which is obviously becoming a problem. He swoops in his Thunderhawk gunship behind my tanks, which were moving up. I had hoped to try take his objective, but as we'll see in a bit, the Thunderhawk gunship aiming in on the rear armor, where they were getting a bonus, was very effective. On the bottom, I am moving my missile detachment out because I'm feeling that they probably need to get on that central objective to kind of control the numbers. Turn 1, we had plenty of troops. There was lots of decisions making. The turns got a lot faster as things went on. And as you can see here, there are very, very few units left to play around with in the field. And then after a few more explosions, there was not much left at all. So I lost both my knights. I lost both my tanks. And that tactical squad in the bottom right were just skewered. So yeah, the Cerastus knight took its lance and just stabbed it through the entire building. So what do we have left on the board? Turn 5. And this is the end of turn 5. And this is everything that's left at the end of turn 5. So the knight moves over, gets my missile squad, and again, because it's such a high combat assault value, assault factor, even though he's going through 4 of them, it just doesn't matter. Like, he just obliterates them, and he has the reach to do it. So he's able to stretch out, and essentially he just cleaved through that entire squad. That left me with just the one. So at the very end of the game, the only model I had left was this one dread. But in, true Imperial Fist style, they fought on the objective to the very last man. And when we counted up the points, it did come out just about in my favor. I think if we'd gone back and we had looked at a few of the cases, to get those big points, I needed to have no one contesting it. So I think that would have probably swayed it over to Owen. Anyway, we weren't playing for a competition. We weren't playing to win necessarily. We were just there to play out the game and have a bit of fun. And have fun we did. I really, really enjoyed the game. There were lots of decisions to make. Where we set up, where we moved to, what we shot at first. The little bonuses you get with the orders are super important. The choices you get to make during the turn, that kind of can change that. So choosing whether to overwatch or choosing whether to react and take away your token. I felt that was very engaging. There was a back and forth constantly. It wasn't I play my turn out, destroy 50% of your army. You play your turn out. Just like that style of gaming that unfortunately is classic 40k and Age of Sigmar. I have so many problems with it. But this Legions Imperialis version, where you're constantly going back and forth all the time, really, really felt engaging. The fact that you had to kind of plan out your turn as best you could at the start with your orders and then kind of adjust on the fly as things happened was great. It really, really felt like there was a giant section of a city, and this was a major battle that was playing out in front of us. So even though the dice betrayed us both on a couple of occasions, I think the dice were friendlier to me than Owen, to be fair. There were a few turns where it definitely felt like the Emperor was on my side. It really did feel good. It had a real cinematic feel. It felt like there was a lot of tactical decisions as well as like an overall strategic one. And yeah, I enjoyed the game a lot. So much so that I am now almost finished the 10 rhinos that I have for my Imperial Fists. And I have started undercoating or base coating my infantry for my the Solar Auxilia, which I think are probably going to be an important element of the games. A detachment of Solar Auxilia is relatively cheap and puts more men on the table. And I have them already because I've got Core Box. So I think I'm going to go with that. And it might be fun to try out some of those Marauder destroyers that I happen to have floating around. Yeah, and see how that plays out rather than going at the Knights. The Knights were a lot of fun. I have to admit that Cerastus Knight, which isn't bristling with guns, which is what I would have normally looked for in a Knight, was a hell of a lot more effective than I thought. It was a real melee monster, and just the numbers that it has kind of way outweigh any risk depending on the target. So you can charge in with your plus 14, I'll double check that, but I believe it was plus 14 CAF value, and like it really doesn't matter what your opponent rolls because they're probably rolling at best 2 or 3d6 and getting plus 1 or plus 2. So they need to be very, very lucky to beat what you have, which is 3d6 plus 14. That was great. It was fun to see, and yeah, I think there's just so many options. So many kind of different moving pieces that I'm looking forward to painting up more models with this and playing more games with it. Hopefully you enjoyed this. I know it's not the kind of classic battle report that all the fancy channels have. I enjoyed the game. I had some pictures of the game. I thought it might be fun to let people know what a fun game that Legions Imperialis could be. If you've got any thoughts, please do put them in the comments. I'm always interested in what people say. Anything that I could improve on the channel, or if there is something you would like me to look at in particular. Hope you have a good day, and I hope you enjoyed this. Thanks for making it all the way to the end. Hopefully you enjoyed this video. Each week, I put up a new video talking about one of Games Workshop's specialist games. The goal is always to try and make the best possible two-player experience. If this is something you'd find interesting, Please subscribe to the channel and comment to let me know what you'd like to see in future.